Are you ready to hear an inspirational hero tale about one of our four-legged friends? My name is Kim, and this is Harry Hero Tales. Welcome to episode 10 of Harry Hero Tales, Animals to the Rescue. I'm your host, Kim Hagel. Today is part one of a two-part Harry Hero Tales story, and we'll be, for the first time, welcoming a very special guest. But let me start with his background first because it is considerable and quite extraordinary. Our guest was born in Western Pennsylvania in 1952 and was what many would call a Navy brat. His father was a sonar man and served during the Korean War on the USS Glennon. After making trips to Florida quite often in his childhood, his family ultimately landed in Titusville, where his dad worked at the nearby Kennedy Space Center. Choosing to join a different branch of the military after graduating high school, our guest joined the Army. As I was working on my research, it struck me the timing in which he chose to join the Army. It was 1970. And this was maybe 1 year after the peak of the Vietnam War. Ultimately, our guest did indeed go to Vietnam. During his tenure with the Army, he served in Vietnam flying Cobra helicopters in combat. He was awarded several service awards, including a Purple Heart, 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, a Bronze Star, and 15 air medals with 3 notations for valor. So our guest is definitely a hero. Stick with me because his impressive resume is just getting started. Graduating Summa Cum Laude with a bachelor's degree and also earning a master's degree from Troy University. And all of this he did while still in the Army as a trainer and a writer of instruction manuals for helicopters. He later earned a law degree from Florida State University in 1980. Are you impressed yet? I know I am. Now wait for this one. Our guest was named a Papal Knight of the Order of St. Gregory by the then Pope, Pope Benedict. He earned this through significant work with the poor, as well as helping Haitian detainees in Dade County exercise their right to worship, as well as have access to religious leaders. He was also awarded the Pro Bono Service Award and the Federal Bar Public Service Award. Currently, our guest is the CEO of AIM Immunotech, which is a biotech firm currently seeking cures for cancer and long COVID. Clearly, our guest is a champion of justice and a hero. But you may be asking yourself, what does this have to do with Harry Hero Tales? In his spare time, our guest has been a lifelong horseman and currently owns a horse ranch in Ocala, Florida, where he trains and shows champion thoroughbreds and Pasofino horses. He is also an advocate of support animals in therapy for military veterans suffering from PTSD. As a result, he has recently written a fictional story about a Vietnam veteran suffering from PTSD who has some profound interactions with horses that could be described as equine therapy. The book officially releases on October 1st, but is currently available to pre-order on Amazon or Kindle and is called The Horseman's Tale by Tom Equels, our guest today. So please join me in welcoming to the show Mr. Tom Equels. Welcome, Mr. Tom Equels, or should I say Sir Tom, to the show. I'm
Well,
so honored to have you with us.
it's my honor to be here, and thank you for your interest in my book, The Horseman's Tale. And I've learned that one of the virtues that a knight is supposed to have is humility. So let's just use Tom.
Okay, I was going to ask, but thank you for that. I appreciate it. I will call you Tom from this point on. Although it
Thank
is
you.
It is unique, just since we're starting off right from there. You were knighted in 2012, as I said at the intro. And can you walk our audience through that? What were you knighted for, and what was that experience like?
Well, my knighthood was granted by Pope Benedict, and I'm a knight in the Equestrian Order of St. Gregory the Great, which is several hundred years old, and it's one of the knights of the Papal State. The Pope doesn't tell you exactly why he made you a knight, so but I suspect it. I suspect it's because over period of decades, I was very involved in social justice activities, especially helping poor people, and with a concentration of assistance to immigrants into the Haitian community in Miami, running legal service clinics, housing clinics, things like this. And also over the years, I've become somewhat known for my artwork. I'm a painter, and I've done a number of paintings that are in churches and cathedrals, not just in Florida, but including in Europe as well.
Outstanding. Well, I remember when I was reading a bit of your background, that one stood out because that was a very unique element of your accomplished and remarkable life. So I was curious to learn and hear a little bit more about that.
The,
Uh,
the, the Archbishop of Miami, Archbishop Winsky, sometimes jokes when I see him because the Knights of St. Gregory sit beside the bishop at the altar at papal masses. And he jokes about how, of all the Knights of St. Gregory he's known over the years, I'm the only one that probably knows how to ride a horse. It's called an equestrian order. That part
exactly.
of it is, that part of it has got lost over the years.
Interesting. Well, and I mean, that's an interesting dovetail into your book. So, your new book, it is a fictional book, The Horseman's Tale. It is
Yes.
available now on pre-order, but officially launches, if you will, on October 1st. Can you walk our listeners through a little bit about your book, The Horseman's Tale?
I'd be happy to. The Horseman's Tale is a story about a Marine Corps veteran who's retired, and he does have PTSD issues, not only from his military service, but from other aspects of his life that he's dealing with in a Veterans Administration journaling therapy program. And the journaling therapy is when you feel impulsive anger or different triggers that you recognize that are related to PTSD. You sit down and you write about what you think may be causing it or just what's on your mind, and then come back later and it has a therapeutic impact, whether you share it with anybody or not. Now, he was stationed at Camp Lejeune, the protagonist. His name is Jake Montgomery, Colonel Jake Montgomery, after he got back from Vietnam. And his wife and young son went to live with him at Camp Lejeune. And while he was at Camp Lejeune, his wife became depressed, and she was also became pregnant, and they lost the baby due to birth defects. And this story starts where he's watching CNN just a couple years ago. He's watching CNN, a program called The State of Hate about the rise of white supremacy and neo-Nazi organizations. And it's irritating him because this is inconsistent with what he believes America should be about, especially given having grown up in the segregated central Florida town that he experienced a lot of serious issues related to racism and segregation and racial violence. But then this commercial comes on, which is a law firm commercial talking about Camp Lejeune and how it had been covered up for years, but now there's a claims act that allows, even though the statutes of limitations have run, people to file a claim. If you lived at Camp Lejeune during the time when he lived there, if anybody in your family had depression, neurological issues like Parkinson's, cancers, especially liver cancer, or birth defects, then you might have a claim. And that's when he realizes for the first time that his wife, who had died just a year earlier of liver cancer after battling Parkinson's for 10 years and severe depression, and their second son, who was born with severe birth defects and died at Camp Lejeune, that it was because of that water contamination. And he blames himself because I brought them there, and he explodes in anger, but then collects himself. He's by himself, and he collects himself and then begins to write. And this novel takes place in that 6 or 7 hours in the evening, where he just bears his soul. And it in the epigraph is, I translated in a very ancient Spanish poem, and even if you speak Spanish, it's hard to understand the poem because it was written much at the same time as the Canterbury Tales were written. We probably all had to read those in high school or college literature and old English, and you're looking at that, I don't know what that means.
I don't think I read it successfully, but yes, I know what you mean.
But there was a poem by St. John of the Cross, which I translated into a modern format. And I took a paragraph from that poem as the epigraph because the poem's Dark Night of the Soul. And this was Colonel Jake Montgomery's Dark Night of the Soul. Once he started, it all came out. And that's the springboard for this novel.
Yeah, it was an interesting approach that you felt that you were reading along as he was writing it. And that was an approach that was inspired because I didn't expect it. And the way in which the book starts, you can feel him moving around his mind as things come to him that propel the story forward.
Yeah, it's written exposure. The BA program is called Written Exposure Therapy, and the acronym is WET, or WET. And one of the aspects of this character, and it's actually the beginning of his post-traumatic stress syndrome, is Jake Montgomery was born autistic with what it used to be called Asperger's syndrome, but now is a relatively high functioning form of autism. And his father, especially, was very strict about hiding from everybody this autistic condition and pushing him to act in a way where that was disguised. And this effort to hide his true nature was successful. He became able to disassociate himself and be somebody else, but at the same time, it twisted him. And that's an aspect of this book that's also important, because we all deal with things in our lives that we may be ashamed of, or we may find unattractive or socially unacceptable, or for whatever reason, we hide them from others. Sometimes we hide them from ourselves. So a lot of this book is a psychologically peeling an onion layer by layer, and the journaling therapy allows us to do that with Jake Montgomery's psyche.
Well, yes, it propels the story forward. And as I was saying, it may not necessarily always be in a linear fashion, but you weave it together in a way that you go back quickly to, as his mind is when he's journaling, you go back quickly to tell a story from maybe in the past that's absolutely relevant to where you are in the story to then move it even farther forward. So I thought it was a compelling technique. It wasn't what I expected when I first started reading it, but I found it an interesting way to understand Jake and really get into his story and interest in what's going to happen next. I did have a question that I wanted to ask. So you were in the United States Army. Your father...
That's right. It's fiction, and everybody wants to be a Marine.
Well, so your father was in the Navy in World War II. You were in the Army in combat and are a decorated Vietnam veteran, and your main character is a Marine. I'm just curious, can you tell our audience a little bit why you made that choice?
Well, I probably could. I know a lot of Marines, and I wasn't without a factual basis for I think I'm an authentic character, but if the protagonist was an Army Cobra gunship pilot fighting in Vietnam, the line between fiction and reality would start to get blurred. So I flew 300 combat missions in Vietnam, and very familiar with the stresses of combat and the impact that the loss of friends and loved ones in a combat environment can. The idea that you're waking up at 5:30 every morning, knowing that you're going to get a mission briefing to go someplace where people are going to be shooting at you, you're going to be shooting at them. That's a stressor in and of itself. So, so that was a 1 year period of mine I was very grateful to have survived. And I think I brought a lot of that into this character, this fictional character, but I tried to tap into what I've seen in myself and friends that I have that were Vietnam veterans, that and how the violence and the fear and the risk of death and those issues, the separation from loved ones for extended periods, those issues affected veterans after the fact.
Right. So, but there are other critically important, and it's a huge dynamic. Obviously, his experience during the war and is a big part of his journaling and the stories that he tells, and probably a trigger for his anger. But there are stories in his past and childhood and later that also need, I think, some PTSD therapy. So, one question that I have about that is he grows up around horses. His family, their business is around horses. And so he had skill sets around that he, I think, benefited from that you explored throughout the book. Can you tell us a little bit about that background and what influence you think that had on your main character, Jake?
Well, I've been around horses since I was a little boy, and my family's always had horses, and so I have familiarity with that milieu of horse farming and horse racing and horse shows and horse training. And one of the things that I've learned over the years in my work with horses is that, especially those horses that have been my horse over the years, is there's a deep relationship that can evolve between humans and horses that is very meaningful, very loving, and often therapeutic. And that's because horses are extremely empathetic animals. Their empathy IQ, I believe, is much higher than most people's. And when I talk about empathy, what I'm talking about is they can sense what you're feeling. It's not just sense it, they feel what you're feeling. So the relationship with a horse, if you become a skilled horseman, you learn that you have to adjust your feelings to a place where the horse is calm. If you're dealing with a horse that is afraid or has anxieties, you have to take the time to consciously say, okay, now smile, take a deep breath. I'm calm. I feel good. I'm happy. And the horse will feel that. And it goes both ways. You know, there's an old saying, this goes back probably for ages, that the best thing for the inside of a man is the outside of a horse.
So, with Jake's experience growing up in that environment, he had an outlet to work through any issues or calm down, if when he was a child, if something was going on, whether it be in school or with a bully or outside of that, witnessing some of the things that he did on the farm during what was then segregated South growing up. He had that as an outlet. So, is that a reason that the equine therapy is not just the journaling part of the book, but what he explores in equine therapy was
It,
so natural for him?
well, it is natural for him. And it's the equine therapy as it applies to the protagonist, Jake, is not described as equine therapy because in the book sort of touches on this because he's with horses all the time.
Right.
And so he's getting those benefits before he even knew there was such a thing as equine therapy. But now one of the things that he does in the course of this book, it deals with rescuing horses and also providing riding for children in the community. And that's based upon very well-known equine therapy aspects of equine therapy with children with autism. And I personally have helped children with autism to ride and experience the spirit of the horse and the joy of the horse. And it's mentioned in the book. I imported this element from my life into the book where, you see a child that maybe been locked in a sort of a freeze loop uh, for who knows how long, for the light up and smile and everything relaxes. And I've seen parents when they see that start to cry because these are things that we don't have a cure for. So it always brings great joy to me when a horse, and I had a horse that was especially good with that. And so is the one thing that's only semi-fictional in this book is a number of these horses are based upon real horse characters that I've had during the course of my 70 some years. So I've been through a few horses up there over 70 years, and a lot of them were very good friends.
So on the cover of the book, there's a description about a quote special horse. Can you explore any background? What makes the horse special? And is there a true story behind that horse?
Well, there's a horse in the book named Shiloh, and I had Shiloh from the time he was a baby till the time he passed at about 22 years old. And Shiloh was a gentle giant. He was a big spotted saddle horse. And he was a horse that helped me a lot. And I spent a lot of my recreational time with him, and just because it made me feel good, and I think made him feel good too. We had a good bond. But also he was the kind of horse where you could put young children on him, and he sensed that he was there to help and never a wrong move and always very loving. So he had a bit of a fan club over the years. And this book started the novel with me actually. I was sitting in my recliner watching CNN, and this commercial came on about Camp Lejeune. And I said, that would make a great way to put this story that I had been working on into the format of a novel. But when Shiloh died, it's been about years ago now, a while after he died, I sat down and wrote a story about Shiloh. But anyway, and it helps me sometimes to write because his loss was bothering me. So a little bit like journaling therapy, I sat down and I wrote about it. And one of my friends read the story, said, "This is a great story. You should turn it into a novel." And so I wrote about a couple other horses that, but they weren't really connected together until I got this inspiration to write about this Marine whose family's been damaged by the Camp Lejeune situation. So he can go through these things in his life in a way that allows it to all come together, but in a short period of time. The story of Shiloh was the foundation for what became this novel.
So would you define Shiloh as a hero to Jake?
Well, yeah, Shiloh was like a best friend to Jake, and Shiloh was a guide to Jake in the book, and as he was as my horse Shiloh was to me. I learned things from Shiloh. We sometimes humans are very arrogant, and one of the things we can learn as a virtue is humility. And horses are often very humble in their approach and how they do things. And we have to realize that there are animals out there that can teach us and that can love us. Sometimes with a more perfect love than we even know how to express ourselves. So, so I tried to bring that I learned from Shiloh into the book, not just with the character of Shiloh in the book, but in all of the stories. There are elements of virtue like love, forgiveness, and compassion, and acceptance that are built into the story.
So I do want to ask, there were some choices in the book that caught me by surprise and ways in which Jake responded to certain stimuli. If you would like to answer why you made the choices that you made.
Well, Jake's character and his Marine Corps service capitalized in part upon this. Jake's character is one of a fighter, and the book ties back to a fictional heritage that goes back to the English Normans, who were Vikings, and berserkers, and the berserker warrior. And so, in that character, I've portrayed Jake as having this berserker gene, where he has the capacity for great and tremendous violence, and it's a capacity that in a war can serve somebody very well. It's something that in peacetime may be difficult to control, but he learns to control it when this drunk driver massacres his parents and in a horrific accident, and he has a history of prior deaths due to being intoxicated with, not just with alcohol but also with drugs. Jake moves into that space as where his desire to seek justice is overwhelmed by this violent berserker urge, and giving into that also brings back PTSD issues that he thought he had gotten away from. So it's I had a reading group with the book, and one of the ladies that was a part of the reading group, and then this particular part of the book, she said gave her a nightmare. So
I did not see that coming. I'll be honest. That was a
yeah.
choice that I wanted to ask you about because it isn't at the beginning of the book. It isn't the traditional arc of starting there and where it would end that I was anticipating.
Just as a note, I do study horse cultures and everything, and so the framework around that I won't go into the episode because people, I don't want to be
Right.
taking the drama away, but it's very much based upon the traditional Mongol method of punishment.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I wasn't sure how to ask that question without revealing too much about the book, but yes, that whole scenario for our listeners, I highly recommend this book and prepare yourself because there are going to be some elements and some things where the story is going to take you that you were not anticipating, which is what makes it and such a great read because you a lot of times I'm reading books and I can anticipate where it's going and what's going to be happening. And I don't think that there was ever a feeling, strong or otherwise, that I really could see where this was going. And that was one where I absolutely did not see that coming. On behalf of Harry Hero Tales, Animals to the Rescue, I sincerely thank our guest, Tom Equels, for his time with us today. If you're interested in more information about the book, you can visit the website, thehorsemanstale.com, or visit Amazon, where you'll find information about the book and its availability. You can certainly pre order it today. So, while this only touches the surface of this amazing hairy hero, we have to leave it there for this episode. If you know of a great hairy hero tale and would like to hear it on this podcast, email us at harryherotales@gmail.com. For more information on this program, visit our website, www.harryherotales.com. Now remember, that's TAILS.com. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and wherever you get your podcasts. This is a Southpaw Productions podcast, edited, produced, and hosted by me, Kim Hagel. Opening and closing music is provided by Mary Selvage. Be sure to follow her on Instagram at Selvage613 for her live show schedule, and check out her complete catalog of music available on Spotify, Apple Music, and more. And remember, there are hairy, four-legged heroes all around us. Who knows? You might even adopt one. I've adopted many little heroes from some amazing animal rescue organizations, and I've featured two on my website: the All American Dachshund Rescue and the French Bulldog Rescue Network. If you are looking to rescue your next hero or would like to help with transport or financial support, I highly recommend both of these organizations. Neither are affiliated with this program in any way, but they both have my sincere gratitude and support. Thank you to all of the heroes of the world, and a special shout out for hairy heroes everywhere.